Ed doesn't approve of school sex ed class, so offers his own competition with the school. My good friend works in administration at the high school, and she's had her share of stories over the years, but, well, is this one a roller coaster? The high school offers sex ed every year as part of the mandatory health credit. Families are free to opt their kids out of sex ed if they wish. The kids still have to participate in the alternative health course offering. All of the students take the same introductory portion before splitting off into sex ed and those who have opted out. This initial section covers, among other things, the dynamics of a healthy relationship, including matters of consent. Right away, and immediately after the first day, a father tried to remove his son from the class. It was explained to him that he couldn't opt out of this portion. He was furious, posting these long rants on the town Facebook page and on the school's parent portal, and I'm sure elsewhere, about how the class was political and we were shaming his son for being a man, and it was up to the families to teach these private subjects so the school should stay out. He took issue with the lessons on habitually asking for consent, but also on the importance of discussing emotions freely, healthy division of labor between romantic partners, and avoiding sexual harassment. This is how this guy began to develop a following. Parents would say they disagreed with him on almost everything he was spouting, but that they were in lockstep that it wasn't the school's place to teach kids about personal topics like relationships. He started camping outside of the building while his son's section of the class was being taught, and shouting his own theories and beliefs at kids as they walked into the building, even handing out a pamphlet he got off some junk website. The school is set up as such so that it's easy to be on a public thoroughfare but still within full view of a classroom, so we didn't have legal grounds to send him packing. His supporters would honk their horns or even occasionally stop by to bring him cold drinks and sandwiches. It was nuts. Then one day towards the end of the non-optional portion of the class, they had a police officer coming in to talk to everyone about how to report a sexual assault, know if you've been assaulted and what to expect when you go to make your report, etc. The officer's own daughter is a student at the high school, so he was extra protective of the whole group. When he saw this guy standing outside the building shouting about how mutual consent is for the weak, he wasted no time shoving him off. This happened right outside of the main administrative building. The guy tried to argue, "I'm on public land, I have a right to be here and say whatever I want," and started quoting some city ordinance, thinking he'd really gotten one over on the veteran police officer. Nope, he wasted no time informing him, "You're causing a disturbance. You can leave or I can remove you. You've got about 10 seconds to decide." He watching him get in his car to be sure he actually left, and apparently the guy made a few more smart comments to him about how the blacks are right. There really are no good cops left these days. But luckily the officer didn't let any of those gross comments provoke him and just said, "Sure, everyone certainly has a right to hold their own opinions and express their views. But when and how you do it matters in the eyes of the law. You can't shout fire in a crowded theater. You can't contradict teachers outside of their classrooms at the school. Hearing me?" At first blush the guy was not hearing him, because he drove off without response, and that story in and of itself spread like wildfire around town. However, for everyone who pasted him as a laughingstock for making such a display, there was someone else who saw him as a hero fighting the system, and it turns out he was actually listening closer to the officer's warnings than any of us would have liked. The optional sex ed portion began the following week, and this fool had begun placing Facebook ads. Not the paid kind, but just posting his own ads from his account for his own sex ed class, because he can say whatever he wants in the appropriate setting, right? What sort of negligent, ass-backwards, head-in-the-sand kind of parent you have to be to let your child leave school in the middle of the day to attend, as he dubbed it, sex ed for real men, inside a stranger's house? A private citizen unaffiliated with the school is beyond me. But the group who had begun to follow his whole campaign and support him online and such was all for it, and actually deliberately sent their kids to him. To be fair, he did advertise it as being totally non-sexual in nature, with his big driver being that those discussions should be left to the parents, and he was offering a class that covered traditional morals, values, and chivalry, promising to take us back to the good old days. He also had plenty of stuff about how his taxes pay the school's salary, so if enough people made their preferences clear, the faculty would have to fall in line and stop disseminating harmful materials. As far as we knew, this guy had a job, so he must have taken considerable time off to make this happen. A significant chunk of the male students, about a fifth, withdrew in favor of sex ed for real men, some satirically more so than seriously, but still, even one was to many in my book regardless of reasoning. My friends and I managed to get our hands on a copy of a portion of the syllabus that was leaked, and it covered things like the man's and woman's role in the relationship, what's appropriate after how many dates rounding the bases, and some random survival skills training was mixed in as well, grouped under making yourself desirable. As this was going on, he sent taunting letters to the school faculty letting them know how popular his class was and how great it was going, as though his son didn't still have to continue attending there, and he, the dad, didn't have an ongoing relationship with the faculty, plus at least one more kid who hasn't hit high school yet. Whenever he was on campus to watch his son in a game or just pick him up, he made a point of telling the faculty involved in health class what a better job he was doing of teaching than they ever did, and how he was saving the immoral world by righteously luring kids into his basement during school hours. By the end of the semester, which just wrapped up, he was genuinely expecting some sort of white flag from the high school side. When they called him in for a meeting, he was all set to gloat and even charitably, or so he thought, conceded that the people at school were just doing their jobs, and couldn't help that he was better at teaching than they were because he was working with fewer bureaucratic restrictions. The faculty patiently listened to this as he wouldn't let them get a word in edgewise, before finally informing him that his son would need to take summer school, because while sex ed was optional, the alternative, on-campus course was required in its place. This man was somehow shocked to learn his son couldn't just be pulled out of school midday every week for months. The school explained they'd sent letters home and called, but never heard back from him, which is why they were having this meeting, which was a fiasco to schedule in and of itself. Everyone is guessing he just didn't open any letters from the school and didn't bother listening to their messages. So he started talking about how his son had taken a health class, and he had right to teach his own son if he preferred, and on and on. They replied that if he wanted to homeschool his son, he was free to do so. However, he'd have to annul him from public school and register his son as a homeschooler. He could not switch between his own lessons and public school on a whim. He was enraged by this and felt wholly entitled to circumvent state regulations and even federal procedures in order to, well, basically do whatever he wanted. So he said his son would just fail health and that he took it as a badge of honor. The school said that was his prerogative, however, in the case his son would not be promoted to the next grade level, as it was a required credit. This really blustered him, and he left, and after a few days of thinking about it, informed the school in writing that he would be annulling his son and registering him somewhere else. The school cheerfully informed him that would be fine, but he couldn't enroll him as matriculating into the coming grade, because they could not certify his passing until he completed all required credits for his current year. A logistical note, the other students in sex ed for real men were not facing summer school because their health class was scheduled at a separate time, so they took it in addition to the credit-bearing and school alternative. Those in the same period block as his son just didn't take this guy's class, or withdrew to return to school after receiving the first notice home. So now, unfortunately, his son is bearing the weight of his entitled parents' poor choices, but not alone. Busing is significantly decreased during summer school, so from what I understand, his father will have to wake up early every day to drive him in.
We don't go to school here. My first time posting here, when I, male probably 17 at the time, was in high school in South Carolina. I went to Pennsylvania on spring break with my best friend and his family. They was originally from the Allentown area but moved to South Carolina in 1993 when we meet in the 6th grade. He used to always tell me about going to Hershey Park, Eagles games, 76ers games, and things like that. The weeks before our school spring break on a weekend when I was at this house, his parents asked me if my parents would let me go back with them to help pack up his grandmother's house due to her going in a nursing home. On the 3rd day, myself and Daniel, best friend, was sitting out on the porch when 2 officers had pulled up. Officer 1, why are you not in school? Me, we're on spring break. Officer 2, not for another 2 weeks. Me, we're not from here. We live in South Carolina. Daniel, yeah, if you look at the back of my dad's van, you'll see it has South Carolina plates. We're just here to pack up my grandmother's house. Officer 1, what school do you go to? The school name in South Carolina. Officer 2, what school do you really go to? Daniel, school name in South Carolina. Officer 2, I believe you to go local school name, They always have kids ditching school. Daniel, no, we're really from out of town. Me, yeah, I can show you my driver license and school ID card. Daniel, I can call me dad to come outside if you don't believe us. Daniel opened the door and calls out for his dad, but he's in the shower and doesn't hear him. And his mom left to go to the store down the block with his sister. Officer 1, we're taking you boys to the school. Me, well then can I drive? Daniel, wonder if it's lunchtime at the school. As they are putting Daniel and myself in the car, Daniel's dad comes outside. Dad, what are you doing to my boys? Officer 1, taking them to school. Officer 2, you going to be in trouble for these boys ditching school. Dad, we don't live here. We live in South Carolina. They're on their school spring break. We're only here for pack up my mother-in-law house cause she is now in a nursing home. If you looked at the plate of my van, you would have seen it has South Carolina plates on it. Did you ask the boys for their driver's license or school ID card? At this point, I'm in the back of the car. Me, come on, what's taking so long? I'm ready to go to school. I don't want to miss lunch. Daniel, yeah, come on. I think it's tacos for lunch today, and I love tacos. Officer 2, please step out the car. Me, but what about our tacos? Dad, boy, get out the car. What a day that was.
We must have a private room. My 10-year-old son was in the hospital after a surgery. Rooms are shared. Word is full. My son is quietly reading a book out loud, and we get a new roommate. I have been coming in and out of the room, and I guess I look like a nurse. Nurses are allowed to wear a variety of clothing. This was pre-COVID. I tend to walk quickly. It was wearing hair and ponytail, and must have had that bustling nurse look. Daughter of new patient is highly agitated as they arrive from a procedure and says that the room is too loud and disturbing for her child. Called seems fine, not bothered, not in pain or looking stressed at all. She insists on having a private room. I am out of the room getting some things for my son. She is not getting any joy from nurses, so she corners me, assuming I am in charge here, and lets loose on how the other child, my son, is too loud and her child needs peace and quiet. Good luck getting that in any hospital room, haha. Her insurance pays for a private room. All great except it is a full house, so no space for private, and I needed to make it work. The look on her face when I told her I did not work here and the child in the next bed was my son. At least she looked a bit abashed, but mostly exasperated. I get it's a stressful time, but the entitlement on this lady was ridiculous.
I'm not your DoorDash driver and quit trying to take my food. This happened last week. I was visiting Austin, Texas and staying at a nice hotel. I'm Brown and I'm an ID executive. I ordered takeout from a local BBQ place and was going back to my hotel with my food in a large paper bag, with the name of the restaurant written in large letters on the side. There was a group of people outside the hotel, and as I approached the hotel entrance, this woman rushes over and grabs my bag of food. I yank it back. She goes, "I've been waiting for this." It just hits me that she thinks I'm her food delivery driver here with her food. I politely tell her I'm not her delivery driver. With a confused look on her face, she goes, "Are sure? You look like one." At this point, I just want her to let go of my bag, and a few of her guy friends come over and tell me to stop giving her a hard time and to hand over her food. So I spell it out for them. I am not your food delivery driver. This is my food. I'm a guest at this hotel. I yank the bag away from her, and as I enter the hotel, I see her pulling out her phone and saying, "I'm calling delivery service and telling them what an a-hole you are, and I want my money back." Go right ahead, lady. Go right ahead. Edit. I am overwhelmed by all the positive feedback. You all rock and represent what I've come to love about my country. In hindsight, I was actually not upset over the whole thing, but simply amused by it. Sometimes you just have to laugh your way through an uncomfortable situation.
Check out my other excellent videos